jail death that we had Friday. The inmate who passed away Friday, January the 31st, has been identified as 41-year-old Justin Segerson. Though this appears to be an apparent drug overdose, this remains an active investigation. So in these kind of cases, while we may suspect that it's a drug overdose that led to the death of Mr. Segerson, the official cause of death and the ruling would have to be made by the medical examiner's office. So our detectives are investigating it right now, working with the medical examiner's office to determine that final outcome. We certainly ask that you keep Mr. Segerson's family and friends in your thoughts and prayers. Obviously, this is very difficult news for them to hear. And so we want to make sure that we hold space for them and offer our prayers and our thoughts to that family as well. After Friday, Saturday morning, in the early morning hours, we had a second death inside of the jail, and I'll just offer some comments regarding that. On Saturday, February the 1st, shortly after 4:15 a.m., an inmate at the main jail, 201 Poplar, was found unresponsive, apparently due to a suicide. Emergency first responders with the Memphis Fire Department arrived on the scene and pronounced the inmate deceased at 4:28 a.m. The inmate has been identified as 22-year-old Sherman Weekly. The Sheriff's Office has launched an investigation into this incident surrounding the inmate's death, and this remains an ongoing investigation. And as I said in the case involving Mr. Segerson, just like this case, we also ask that you keep the family and friends of 22-year-old Sherman Weekly in your thoughts and in your prayers. No family wants to receive the knock at the door that their loved one has been found deceased. Those are very difficult knocks that we have to make, and those are definitely difficult conversations that we have to have with these families. And so I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about mental health, number one, in our community, but in this case, particularly in the jail. I'll say this, the jail is not a place for anyone who may be battling mental health issues. There are other community resources out there that we certainly believe is a better setting for someone who may be battling mental health issues. And so if I can just paint the picture for a moment, when a person is arrested and they're brought to the Shelby County Jail, during the booking process, they go through a series of questions that are asked by our medical and mental health vendor by the name of WellPath. And those questions get into their medical history or any kind of medical diagnoses. It gets into their mental health history, if there's any histories of suicide or anything like that. And we even ask them if they're suicidal. And one thing that I've always said, for any detainee that comes to the Shelby County Jail, he or she must be a partner with us when it comes to their medical health as well as their mental health. And to some degree, these questions are only as good as the respondents. So if a detainee is feeling suicidal, but they don't share that information, it makes it difficult for us to determine the risk factor. We do have protocols in place if someone is suicidal, you know, how we monitor them, who we talk to, how often they're seen by the mental health provider. There are different protocols that are in place once we know that a person has a high risk of committing suicide. But I say again, the detainee have to be good partners with us on that. Same thing with medical. There are a number of detainees that come inside of our facility who have diabetes or heart disease. Some even have cancer. And again, in many cases, we won't know those things if the detainee does not share those things with us. And oftentimes, we find out about medical issues when there's a crisis, when someone has passed out or they're unresponsive, and then we have to activate our medical team. Sometimes, same with mental health, we don't find out that these individuals are at risk of suicide until they take some type of act. And we don't want that. We want anyone to come to our jail to share that information with us so we can activate the many protocols that we have available. But then also for a detainee cellmate, if they hear about it, we would love for them to report that information to us as well. We will take this information, whether it's from the detainee, a cellmate, or even one of our staff members, so that we can activate these protocols. To paint the picture, today as I stand here, we have about 2,550 inmates inside of the Shelby County Jail. And nearly 700 of them are prescribed some form of mental health or behavioral health kind of medication. And so we do our best to service the detained population as best we can. But again, it's a partnership. Now, in this case involving Mr. Weekly, it was probably one of the saddest cases I think I've seen of a suicide inside the Shelby County Jail. Mr. Weekly, we believe, left a suicide note behind. And in reading this particular note, Mr. Weekly's mental health issues has nothing to do with the Shelby County Jail, but more about perhaps the life that he lived growing up in Memphis. And so I won't get into the details of what that letter contained, but I will say that this young man seemed to be troubled if this letter was written by him. So we are investigating this particular death as a suicide, but I definitely want to spend a little bit of time talking about our efforts from the time that a person is brought to the jail, what we try to do to prevent these types of incidents from happening. And I want to make sure that I add this as well. Periodically, we will solicit the help of national experts to come in to review our policies and to review our procedures to make sure that we are up to date on the latest policies or procedures when it comes to avoiding these types of incidents. And so anytime this occurs, we are always in review of our policies and we're always in review of our procedures because we want to make sure that we prevent this from happening again. We want to make sure that we save lives and never have to knock on another door of a family member again. And with that, I'll take your questions.
The 41-year-old possible drug overdose, how long had he been in jail? What was he there for? And do you believe the drugs came from outside the jail? Where did they come from?
So both of these individuals were brought to the jail around mid-December. So they had been with us a pretty good amount of time. And so we don't know exactly how this individual may have gotten these drugs. Obviously, that's part of our investigation. And so in both incidents, we launched two types of investigations. One is an administrative investigation where we're looking at our protocols and our policies to see if we follow them to the T. But then also there's a criminal investigation to see if there was any kind of criminal activity surrounding these particular cases. So both investigations are ongoing. And we hope to be able to make those determinations, but it's certainly something that we want to know how Mr. Segerson acquired these drugs and where they came from.
Have they identified the drug?
I'm sorry?
Have they identified the drug?
So we have identified the drug as fentanyl. Again, we're not saying that that's the cause of death. We know that he had a medical emergency. We believe that he could have accessed fentanyl. We did find some fentanyl in the nearby area of where he was found. And so we tested that product and it came back as fentanyl. But I say again, the official cause of death has to be made by the medical examining officer. So I don't want to make the mistake of even suggesting that this is the exact cause of death.
What is the Sheriff's Office doing this is like the third fentanyl death we've had in recent months, and so what is the Sheriff's Office doing to sort of prevent the flow of the drugs in the jail?
So I'm not exactly sure if this is the third fentanyl death we had. I hear your question, but let me just respond to it in this way. We are always employing various strategies from K-9 searching commissary that's coming inside of the facility. We're doing routine and regular searches of the jail. Some of them are scheduled, some of them are surprised. We, as I said last week, we're conducting robust background checks on our employees, making sure that, at least we're trying to make sure that we hire the best employees. We have canines inside of the jail as well. You may have covered this a little more than a year ago, where we partnered with a company to bring in a scanner. We call it a Tech 84, and it's very similar to what you would see at the airport. You know, again, that's used to detect not only, well, any kind of contraband. So we're always looking at different strategies to see what we're doing and what more we can do. I can tell you our staff is constantly in contact with national experts, accreditation agencies. We're always attending conferences, trying to find out what other facilities are doing. These issues are not just unique to the Shelby County Jail. It's pretty unique to just corrections as a whole. But we're always trying to find out what is the best way to move forward to keep these types of substances from ever entering our jail. I think a few years ago we even changed how we accepted mail into the jail and how we searched the mail to make sure that people were not mailing certain drugs or contrabands into the jail. So I can assure you that we're just not sitting on our hands. We're always trying to figure out what is the newest way and the best technology to help us prevent these types of incidents from occurring.
With respect to Mr. Weekly's death and apparent suicide, what impact had the doors and the door lock issues had on corrections officers being able to survey individual cells and make sure that things like that don't happen, or make sure that they're on top of, if someone is attempting to commit suicide, that they're getting right on top of it and they see it right away?
Well, I can appreciate the question, and let me just answer it, I guess, in this way. So I stood at this very podium last week, and to some degree, I celebrated the announcement of the start of 636 doors being replaced in the Shelby County Jail. And so Mr. Weekly was outside of his cell when this suicide occurred. And so I think this particular incident speaks to the urgency that we have had and continue to have when it comes to replacing the doors inside of the jail. Had the door been replaced on Mr. Weekly's cell, he would have been inside of a cell with another inmate whom I believe probably would have prevented this from ever happening. So it is extremely urgent for us to continue to get these doors up so that we can continue to save lives. You know, and I really wish 2 years ago we would have had these doors. But unfortunately, Mr. Weekly got out of his cell in the wee hours of the morning. And if you were here last week, I even shared stories about inmates being outside of their cell at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning after they've been instructed to go in for the evening. And so I think it just speaks to our cry of how important it is to get these doors up so we can keep these inmates inside of their cells, especially during hours in which they should be.
And also with respect to both of these deaths, do you think that this demonstrates the need for also a mental health facility? And where do we stand on that?
Yeah, so absolutely. As I started off, I talked about mental health, not only in the jail, but then also in our community. But I do think that our population, our citizens, our city needs more access to mental health facilities. I know that mental health in some communities and even in some families could be taboo to even talk about it. But here it is, a 22-year-old young man who clearly was suffering from mental illness before he even came to the jail. And so that intervention could have happened in the community. And that's what I hope to see in our community going forward, is that these interventions, mental health intervention, happens in the community so individuals don't have to come to the jail because they are suffering from some type of mental health crisis.
Back to the possible drug overdose, as you said, a lot of jails have problems with drugs. Do you know how your jail stacks up against other counties of similar size?
I don't have that exact data, but like I said again, this is not unique to the Shelby County Jail, but we do understand that because of the interest that the public has, it's important for us to come and talk about this publicly so that we can paint the full picture. And I do want to end on this note. Our staff at the jail is really dealing with some difficult situations. Staffing also contributes to some of the issues that we've had over the last several years. And as I stand here, I am proud to say that over the last year or so that we've hired more than 150 correctional officers. And so we still need about 300 more, but we are better than where we were a year ago, much better than we were 2 years ago, but we're not close to where we want to be. But we're making strides in the right direction. And so our staff is having to deal with some very serious incidents. And so oftentimes we get questions about, well, what are you doing for your staff when it comes to mental health? So when these cases pop up, we make sure that we remind our staff that they have access to mental health within our agency and outside of our agency. And so we make sure that we do frequent check-ins with our staff because it's not every day that any person will find these types of situations coming before them. So we are concerned about the mental health of our detained population, but then we also are concerned about the mental health of our staff as well. They're doing yeoman's work during some very difficult situations and some very difficult environments to work in. So I want to make sure that I commend them for the work that they're doing each and every day. And with that, I'll take one more question and then we'll move on.
If I may, has ICE contacted SCSO about taking anybody out of your custody? And do you have any policies that you've shared with your rank and file about how you would handle that situation?
Yeah, so I'll be real brief. You know, we're getting a lot of questions from the media regarding immigrations and policies and laws and all of those things. And our posture right now is the same that it was a month ago, a year ago. We have not seen any legislation that have been presented to the Sheriff's Office, whether it's from the state government or whether it's from the federal government. So we haven't changed any of our policies. We haven't changed any of our practices. So the way we were working with immigrations and customs last week is the same way we're working with them today. Now, don't get me wrong, we are waiting patiently for any legislation that comes down so we can figure out what impact it's going to have on whether it's our deputies who are patrolling the streets or whether it's our correctional officers who are working inside of the jail. So right now, we're just waiting to see what the state is going to pass or what the federal government may push down to the local level. But our policies are still the same. They have not changed. Our protocols and procedures are still the same. Thank you.
Yes.
Will you get that spelling?
Yeah.
No, I'll get that.
Okay, get
The
that.
spelling of both of them.
Justin Sears, J-U-S-C-I.